I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here tonight. Already you've gone far beyond what most people think this generation is capable of, displaying neither complete apathy nor angry indifference. My name is Joshua Larson. I'd love to tell you that I am a part of a group with an inspiring and patriotic name, the sort of thing that will raise the hair on your arms and cover your body in goose flesh. And I'd love to tell you that we have a clear-cut goal and an easy way of accomplishing it. But the truth is, right now, we are simply a nameless group of angry individuals, mostly middle and lower class. And the road to redemption is very far from clear-cut. Most of you have some concept of the state of today's political scene. For the youngest here, this is probably something that you've absorbed from your parents. I remember my early 20s with a great deal of fondness. At that point in time, I knew exactly what we had to do, and I knew exactly what political party was going to do it. And if you were not a part of that party, well, then you were a part of the problem. Time brings its own lessons and fresh awareness. We are not gathered here tonight as advocates of any particular political party. This is not a Democrat issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is, rather, the defining issue of our time. The question is, 50 years from now, will America still be one of the leading powers in the world, or will the Chinese people be wearing shirts that cost 14 cents a piece to manufacture in American sweatshops? This is no joke. What I am talking about is the collapse of the once proud middle class. Our rights annihilated in favor of those corporations who even now seek to buy the U.S. government and to choose those who lead it through manipulation or outright usurpation of the democratic process. This is not hyperbole. I'm not speaking of some antiquated Orwellian concept. If anything, this is an understatement of the true gravity of the situation in which we find ourselves. Are you aware that thanks to the Supreme Court ruling in 2010 on Citizens United that corporations are accorded the same rights as private citizens, and they are accorded those same rights in the voting process? Are you aware now that the Koch brothers are donating some $900 million to the Republican candidate of their choice during the next election? Do you still think your vote in the primaries counts in determining your presidential candidate? I'm sure most of you have heard the word oligarchy before. The dictionary defines an oligarchy as a form of government in which all power is invested in a few members or a dominant class or clique, government by the few. We have been told that our votes are equal. But when the very wealthy determine the candidates we are permitted to pick from, and when both of those that will be eventually chosen are close friends to big business, it is no longer a choice. This is what oligarchy looks like. And with the cost of education rising at an average of 5% per year, solidly outpacing inflation, becoming a member of this privileged upper class is increasingly difficult. 71% of students graduating in 2015 will carry student loan debt. The average amount of this debt is $35,000. To put this into perspective, that's a hefty down payment on a new house and a payment on a new car. For further perspective, just 20 years ago, only 40% of students graduating had any debt at all. And this, on average, was less than $10,000. This increase in costs is enabled by government-backed organizations such as Sallie Mae, which willingly doles out virtually unlimited funding to poor schmucks like you and I at an affordable 4.29 to 6.21% interest. A rate guaranteed to keep you indebted for years to come. You are thus rendered ineffective until such time as your passion dies out, as you find yourselves shackled to a home with a mortgage and a monthly car payment, with a wife and 2 kids that depend on you, and maybe a few surprise medical bills for good measure. If you choose to forego college, your chance of remaining unemployed skyrockets, your income is cut in half, and you remain just as ineffective with a smaller home that you rent and a crappy used car you bought on Craigslist that you're praying lasts long enough for you to make it to work today. Your goal becomes immediate survival, not long-term planning. While this drama plays out, our leadership continues its expansive invasion of our privacy, authorizing the NSA's collection of tremendous amounts of personal information without any requirement for warrant or just cause, in clear violation of the rights granted to us under the Fourth Amendment, which I shall now quote. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. The backing of the NSA's collection of metadata is the equivalent of the issuance of a global warrant for search of persons, papers, and effects, with the only probable cause being that you are human, and thus liable to be a lawbreaker. And what crime is it that you may have committed? I remember not being fondled into submission by the TSA. I remember a time in my history when I was reasonably certain the government wasn't monitoring my phone calls and reading my emails, and I do not recall any sensation of insecurity stemming from either one of those things, as gratifying as the TSA's attention sometimes is. This is not security, this is suppression. In ignoring the Constitution, we have sounded the death knell of the American dream. The question you should now be asking, after questioning my credibility, of course, is who profits from this? The answer, unfortunately, is that same oligarchy of which I first spoke. This past month, you've heard a lot about rights and you've heard a lot about choice. The Supreme Court decision to legalize gay marriage was intensely polarizing, with both adherents and detractors vocalizing their feelings with little restraint. Social media was full of it. Obama's approval rating rose to the highest point in years. But what far fewer paid attention to was something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a disastrous trade bill that follows on the heels of several other similarly disastrous trade bills, directly benefiting the upper echelons of our society and enabling further outsourcing of American middle-class jobs, replacing you and I with slave labor. And again, I am not speaking in hyperbole. Please read for yourselves the direct effect this will have on Malaysia. This bill was passed even while rainbow-clad parades were held throughout the country, a colorful distraction that served its purpose admirably. I'm going to turn the floor over now to my associate, Mr. Joshua Soltroff, to show you just a little bit about how the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, and now the Trans-Pacific Partnership have directly affected our economy up until this time.
My name is Joshua Soltroff. I'm here to present the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Our manifesto states that we say that for too long, we the people have been poorly represented, that we are denied the choice of leadership, that our leadership has become corrupted by wealth and privilege, and that even those who have entered into the political office with the object of positive change have become jaded and cynical, unable or unwilling to alter the system at the cost of their own political standing. We seek the restoration of the middle class, the end of government programs which enable and encourage spying on private citizens without warrant, the transparency of the government in any and all matters of policy, and the elimination of laws which allow corporations to act as people, thereby creating a system ruled by an oligarchy devoid of conscience. We demand the alteration or elimination of various trade agreements which permit or even encourage the outsourcing of American jobs to foreign shores that have crippled manufacturing and textile industries and have left us a nation entirely of consumers, devoid of the means by which to better ourselves. We renounce the prison industrial complex that promotes the incarceration of American citizens for profit, the military industrial complex which drives us to continually seek conflict, often termed protecting American interests, with other nations around the globe, and the short-sightedness which has led us to the brink of catastrophic climatic change in the interests of corporate profit margins. We demand continuing freedom of speech, continuing free practice of religion, continuing right to assemble, even when the ideological clashes that these things cause may prove uncomfortable. We recognize that restrictions placed on any of these areas undermine the very nature of the Constitution we are sworn to uphold and defend. We are entitled, or we are united in opposition to the suppression or subversion of any or all of these articles, and we refuse to stand silently as our rights and privileges guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution are slowly taken from us. So, some of the goals of NAFTA, which, if you are familiar with NAFTA, is basically the pre-TPP, or should we say the TPP could be more of the child of NAFTA, but much larger. Some of the goals of NAFTA back then were about a quarter of U.S. imports, especially crude oil, machinery, gold, vehicles, fresh produce, livestock, and processed foods, were to come from Canada and Mexico. Another goal was to create 200,000 jobs within 2 years and 1 million within 5 years, based upon exports playing a major role in U.S. economical growth. There would be a dramatic increase in U.S. imports to Mexico in hopes to lower the tariffs. However, critics were concerned that NAFTA would move U.S. jobs to Mexico. While the United States, Canada, and Mexico all experienced economic growth, higher wages and increased trade with each other since NAFTA's implementation, experts disagree on how much NAFTA contributed to these gains, if at all. So some results of NAFTA implementation: U.S. manufacturers moved jobs to Mexico, lowered wages to compete, U.S. subsidized products put Mexican farmers out of business. Between 1994 to 2010, U.S. trade deficits totaled $97.2 billion, displacing 682,900 jobs. 116,400 occurred right after 2007, possibly resulting from the financial crisis. Some more, 80% of job losses were in manufacturing. These industries included motor vehicles, textiles, computers, and electrical appliances. So some of the manufacturing roles for the economy: good wages and excellent benefits to a larger share of workers with less than a college degree, provides good jobs with excellent wages and benefits for minorities, employs twice as many scientists and engineers, and responsible for about 2/3 of private sector research and development. This is for the manufacturing industry. Unfortunately, some trade deficits with China financially led to some problems with this, which eliminated 2.7 million jobs, which were 76.9% manufacturing jobs. Cost our economy $37 billion in lost wages in just 1 year alone. Displaced nearly 1 million jobs with excellent benefits for workers without any college education, 36.4% of total jobs displaced. Workers with a bachelor's degree or more lost 1.057 million jobs. Now, trade deficits, they actually rated this on minorities as well. So between 2001 and 2011, 958,800 good jobs for minority workers were displaced. This is disproportionately a large share of the labor force. The jobs displaced by imports paid 6.1% more for Hispanics in non-traded goods industries, 12% for blacks, 35% for Asians, 45.5% for all other minority workers, and 25.5% for all minority workers. Exactly why? This is due in a large part to China's currency manipulation and other trade distorting practices, as well as their extensive subsidies, illegal trade barriers, and the suppression of wages and labor rights. So what exactly must be done? China must become less dependent on exports and more on domestic demand, led by higher wages and infrastructure spending. China must also adhere to international rules of the road regarding currency manipulation, trade and industrial policies, and respect for fundamental labor and human rights. So one thing that was recommended that I researched between the U.S. and China, some big challenges to put on China is to challenge the trade relationships and address exchange rate policies and labor standards. And that is the source, epi.org. So moving on to today, our main topic is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And you can click on that link on the video.
Right now, big banking, software, pharmaceutical, and tobacco corporations are lobbying governments from 12 countries to negotiate the dirtiest deal you've never heard of. There's a reason you haven't heard of the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are some major corporations and government officials that don't want you to know what's in the deal. For one, our food safety standards, environmental protections, and local labor laws could all be threatened under the TPP. We could all be forced to pay significantly more for the medicines we need, and you could be fined or even sent to jail for downloading copyrighted content on the internet. How will they know if you do it? Because your internet service providers could be required to watch your online activity. But that's not even the scariest part. The TPP gives corporations the power to sue our government in secret foreign tribunals over any law or regulation they claim affects their expected future profits. Don't believe it? It's already happening. Recently, after Canada said U.S. big pharma corporation Eli Lilly's drug price-raising patents were not legit, the firm sued the Canadian taxpayers for a staggering $500 million. And now billions of dollars are being demanded from Germany after it decided to phase out nuclear power following the Fukushima disaster and improve environmental standards for coal-fired electric plants. Philip Morris and Chevron are in on the game too, raiding taxpayer dollars and trying to reverse crucial policies we all rely on. Thankfully, not everyone is willing to sign on the dotted line just yet. In fact, most government officials still have no idea what they're even signing on to, for good reason. So far, Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives have united against fast-tracking the TPP. But there is a mighty corporate lobby that wants to make sure the deal is signed and railroaded quickly through Congress before we know about the damage it will cause us. We must get our senators and representatives to stop fast-track. Here's the deal. Without a strong public outcry, politicians will only hear the concerns of multinational corporations. And once the TPP is signed, it's here forever. There's no expiration date and no separation clause. This dirty deal has been deliberately branded as a free trade agreement. It is anything but free for people like you and me. And it's not really about trade. It could cost us our internet freedom, labor rights, access to affordable medicine, the safety of our food, and protections that keep our water and air clean. Nobody wants to be stuck with a backroom deal we don't want and never voted for. Find out more, speak up, and spread the word.
All right, so I truly believe that that is why we are here today, to start from sort of the ground up and get this moving. I'm going to break this down more and get into detail in some of the specific examples that they brought up within the video. But I think that after watching that video, our goal now should definitely be to take what we know from this and just start spreading the word. So let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. So some corporate power attacks as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership gives foreign corporations the power to attack our laws we rely on for a clean environment. They could sneak around our courts and laws and grab millions of tax dollars simply because they do not like our laws. There's no limit on the amount of attacks or our tax dollars the government can be forced to pay. So something called the investor state regime gives an individual foreign corporation equal status with the entire U.S. federal government. This allows foreign firms to privately enforce public treaty, and this casts U.S. laws and courts aside, even though U.S. laws themselves are being attacked. So offshoring American jobs, 1 out of every 4 American manufacturing jobs have been lost since NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. 60,000 manufacturing facilities have closed. Terms leaked from the TPP provide special benefits to firms that relocate abroad and eliminate risks that make these firms think twice. Since China entered the World Trade Organization in 2001, 2.7 million jobs in the U.S. were lost or displaced. So some more damages of offshoring. Drives down wages. It's the erosion of the tax base. It heightens inequality. Real median wages hover at the levels of the year 1979, despite major gains in American worker productivity. 2 out of every 5 displaced workers experience wage reductions of more than 20%. Displaced workers turn to ever-shrinking welfare programs, resulting in a virtual collapse of some of the local governments. Some safety of our food issues. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will limit food labeling. It will force the U.S. to import meat and poultry that do not meet our U.S. food and safety standards. For example, any U.S. food safety rule on pesticides, labeling, or additives that is higher than international standards would be subject to challenge as illegal trade barriers. So they could literally sue us for this simply because their safety standards do not meet ours, and that's from country to country, which is very crazy. Some more food safety issues. Food labels themselves could be challenged as trade barriers. It would impose limits on labels providing info on where food came from. It would endanger labels' identification on GMOs and how it was produced. Overall, it can mean a barrage of new demands for taxpayer compensation. Banning Buy American or Buy Local preferences. Buying American creates jobs in the country by recycling U.S. dollars back into our economy. This would be gutted, jobs would be lost in an effort requiring national treatment in government procurement. The U.S. government would have to waive the Buy American procurement policies, thus offshoring our tax dollars to create more jobs abroad. Furthermore, corporate TPP proponents argue this would be good because it allows U.S. firms to bid on procurement contracts in TPP countries on equal footing. The U.S. federal marker is higher than the combined national procurement markets of all TPP negotiating parties, though. U.S. firms already have equal procurement access in most TPP countries under already existing deals. The U.S. federal procurement is more than 14 times the size of the total new TPP procurement market. Some public health risks of the TPP, this provides large pharmaceutical firms with power to increase medical prices, as well as limit consumers' access to cheaper generic drugs. Extensions of monopolizing drug patents allows companies to raise prices for medicines and also allows monopoly rights for surgical procedures. Denying consumers access to HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and cancer drugs is deadly, and quite frankly, it's very inhumane. Some more public health risks: empowers foreign corporations to challenge domestic toxics, zoning, cigarette and alcohol, and other public health and environmental policies. It can demand taxpayer compensation for any such policies that undermine their expected future profits. So really, when you look at it, no matter what the issue is, their goal is to make as much money as possible, and any sort of law, whether it be state or federal, gets in their way, they can sue us. So this is a very big deal. I mean, we are basically having our laws overridden of protecting us to get them as rich as possible. So, now, internet freedom. I'm sure you're all familiar with SOPA. ISPs can be forced to police user activity, take down internet content, and cut people off from internet access. Violations could be as simple as a YouTube upload if for personal or even educational purposes. Mandatory fines for non-commercial copies of copyrighted material. In other words, treatment for this could be treated the same as large-scale for-profit copyrights violations. So the common man could actually be fined and treated as though they are a large-scale for-profit copyright violating corporation. Furthermore, breaking digital locks for legit purposes such as using Linux could subject users to mandatory fines. Blind and deaf people would also be affected possibly, as digital locks can block access to audio-supported content and closed captioning. Some financial regulations that the TPP would affect. It will provide big banks with a backdoor means of rolling back efforts to re-regulate Wall Street in the wake of the most recent global economic crisis. It will require domestic law to conform to the now rejected model of extreme deregulation that caused the crisis in the first place. The Glass-Steagall Act would be barred, which was an act that would help eliminate banking crises for 4 decades by prohibiting deposit-holding commercial banks from dealing in risky investments. And it's actually funny because, was it Elizabeth Warren and John McCain went on some bipartisan bill for this now? Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. Go ahead. Some more regulations would ban capital controls, which is an essential policy tool to counter destabilizing flows of speculative money. Even the IMF has endorsed capital controls for its legitimacy for mitigating or preventing financial crises. Would prohibit taxes on Wall Street speculation, which means no hope of passing a Robin Hood tax, which imposes a small tax on Wall Street transactions to tamp down speculation-fueled volatility while generating hundreds of billions of revenue for social, health, or environmental causes. It also threatens the environment. It could increase U.S. exports of natural gas, creating more incentives for fracking, which has been proven to pollute local water supplies and cause small earthquakes. Any resulting surge in natural gas exports would not only raise gas and electricity prices, but would ramp up dangerous chemical-laden practices of fracking. The investory state system could allow corporations to launch a case against domestic environmental laws they see as inhibiting expected future profits. So once again, the goal just comes down to expected future profits. Some more environmental threats. Corporations have already used cases as pressure tactics to avoid having to pay for environmental damages. Investor state threats can pressure governments to weaken environmental health policies and revoke bans. How it affects the public services, it will put rules limiting how governments may regulate service sector utilities, such as utilities, transportation, education, etc. Extreme investor state provisions would allow foreign corporations to drag our government to an extrajudicial tribunal to demand taxpayer compensation for policies to essential services such as water, electricity, and gas. These extrajudicial tribunals have already happened. The TPP will just allow for its expansion. This demand of compensation of tax dollars will only increase the price of these essential services. And more information at exposedtpp.org, which is the same video. Once again, my name is Joshua Soltroff. Thank you all for your time, and I will pass the floor back to Joshua.
So your question at this point probably should be, well, what do we do from here? Where do we go from here? And do we even matter? Well, the answer to that is, as single individuals, we can't make a difference. You know, you and I, we have zero impact on any elections. None of us here are rich. If we were, we probably wouldn't be attending this meeting. We'd be taking our Ferraris down to Atco and racing there. Am I right, Kaufman? So alone, we can accomplish nothing. But the simple fact that some of us have even bothered to take up our valuable free time gathering here tonight means something to me. And hopefully, with your help and your support, we actually can make some sort of meaningful change, because there is some strength in numbers. If enough people are willing to gather and actually willing to contest these laws, these bills which are being passed, which threaten our freedoms, we can make a difference. So, thank you all for coming. This is the Nameless, Faceless Organization, signing out.